Inside the jet, the flight attendant spots her and immediately frowns. "Excuse me, first class is for premium passengers only. Economy boarding is through the rear entrance." The woman glances at her, unfazed. "Check my ticket." She hands it over. The flight attendant yanks it from her hand, scanning it with an amused smirk. Her eyes widen as she realizes the woman is a first-class passenger. But instead of apologizing, she scoffs. "HMPH, whatever, just don't expect special treatment." The woman moves to her seat, keeping her composure. Moments later, the pilot strides in, his face twisted in irritation. "We have a problem," he says, looking directly at her. "We need to verify your ticket again." The woman exhales sharply. "Is there a problem with me or my ticket?" The pilot crosses his arms. "Just a routine check." The flight attendant walks up, still holding the ticket. "Honestly, I don't even know how you got this seat," she mutters under her breath. "You people always find a way to sneak into places you don't belong." Silence. A cold, dangerous silence. Then, without warning, the flight attendant slaps the woman's hand as she reaches for the ticket. The pilot chuckles. "Oops, better watch your hands." The entire cabin gasps. A few passengers turn, eyes wide, but no one speaks. The woman slowly removes her sunglasses, her eyes sharp and piercing. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career," she says, her voice calm but icy. The pilot smirks. "Oh yeah, and who exactly do you think you are?" The woman pulls out her phone and dials a number. The ringtone echoes through the cabin. Within seconds, the flight attendant's work phone buzzes. She checks it, and immediately turns pale. The pilot's radio crackles. "Captain, we have a serious issue. The owner of this airline is on the line. She wants to speak with you." The woman tilts her head. "You see, I don't just fly first class. I own the airline." The flight attendant stumbles back, her face drained of color. The pilot's smirk vanishes. Effective immediately, the woman continues, "You're both fired. Security will be waiting for you when we land." The jet door suddenly opens. Two airport security officers step in, their eyes locking onto the stunned flight crew. The woman leans back in her seat, placing her sunglasses back on. "Now, let's get this flight in the air. I have a business empire to run." The security officers escort the trembling flight attendant and pilot off the plane. The rest of the passengers erupt in quiet whispers, some even applauding. The engines roar to life, and as the plane lifts off, the billionaire smiles. Revenge wasn't just sweet, it was swift. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom glides to a stop in front of the private terminal. The chauffeur steps out, quickly moving to open the door. From the car emerges a tall, elegant black woman, dressed in a tailored designer suit, her heels clicking against the pavement as she walks with quiet confidence. Her sunglasses hide her eyes, but her posture exudes power. She carries herself with the effortless grace of someone who knows exactly who she is and what she's worth. Inside the terminal, other first-class passengers glance at her, some with admiration, others with curiosity. A few make assumptions, whispering among themselves, but she pays no mind. She approaches the check-in counter, sliding her ticket forward with a perfectly manicured hand. The airline agent scans it, nods respectfully, and hands it back. "Enjoy your flight, Ms. Sinclair," they say with a polite smile. She gives them a slight nod in return before making her way toward the jet bridge. Stepping onto the plane, she takes in the luxurious first-class cabin. Plush leather seats, ambient lighting, and personalized service await the elite travelers. As she moves toward her seat, a flight attendant steps forward, her expression shifting the moment she sees her. A smirk plays on the attendant's lips, laced with condescension. She doesn't even glance at the ticket in the woman's hand before speaking. "Ma'am, first class is for premium passengers only," the flight attendant says, her voice carrying an unmistakable tone. "Economy boarding is in the back." The billionaire pauses, her head tilting slightly as if trying to process the audacity of the statement. She says nothing at first, simply handing her first-class ticket over. The flight attendant snatches it, her smirk widening as if expecting to prove the woman doesn't belong. But as her eyes scan the ticket, her face twitches in surprise. She hesitates for a brief second before forcing a tight-lipped smile. "Oh, well, enjoy your flight," she mutters, shoving the ticket back into the woman's hand with unnecessary force before turning away. There's no apology, no acknowledgement of her mistake, just thinly veiled resentment. The woman remains composed, adjusting her handbag as she moves toward her seat. The tension in the air is undeniable. A few nearby passengers glance up from their phones, sensing something unusual. Some shake their heads, aware of what just happened, but no one speaks up. Moments later, as she settles into her seat, another presence looms over her. The pilot has entered the cabin, his face twisted in irritation. He folds his arms, looking down at her as if she's a problem that needs to be handled. "We have a problem," he says coolly. "We need to verify your ticket again." The billionaire's eyes flick up to meet his, her expression unreadable. But something in her gaze makes the pilot hesitate, just for a moment. The billionaire remains seated, her expression calm but unreadable. The pilot stands over her, arms crossed, his gaze filled with skepticism. The flight attendant lingers beside him, her smirk barely hidden. Other first-class passengers glance over but quickly turn away, not wanting to get involved. The tension is thick, an unspoken power struggle unfolding in the middle of the luxurious cabin. The woman exhales slowly, tilting her head. "Is there a problem with me or my ticket?" Her voice is steady, controlled. The pilot scoffs, shaking his head. "Just a routine check," he says. His tone, however, suggests otherwise. There's no real reason for this confrontation, it's something else. The flight attendant steps forward, still holding onto the billionaire's ticket as if it's some kind of evidence against her. She waves it in the air before letting out a quiet chuckle. "Honestly, I don't even know how you got this seat," she mutters, her voice dripping with disdain. "You people always find a way to sneak into places you don't belong." A hush falls over the surrounding passengers. A few shift uncomfortably in their seats, but no one says anything. The billionaire's fingers tighten slightly around the armrest. A flicker of something dangerous flashes in her eyes, but she remains still. The flight attendant smirks, sensing what she believes is submission. With exaggerated impatience, she holds out the ticket. The billionaire reaches for it, moving with the same elegance she had since stepping onto the plane. But then, it happens. A sharp smack cuts through the cabin. The flight attendant slaps the billionaire's hand, yanking the ticket away at the last second. The sound echoes, sharp and deliberate. A few passengers gasp. Someone in the back mutters, "Oh my God." The pilot chuckles under his breath. He doesn't intervene. Instead, he shifts his stance, watching, amused. The billionaire's hand remains suspended in the air for a fraction of a second before she slowly pulls it back. She blinks, once, twice, as if registering what just happened. The flight attendant's smirk grows. "Oops," she says mockingly. "Better watch your hands." The billionaire sets her hands down on her lap, her fingers pressing into the soft fabric of her designer suit. Her movements are deliberate, almost calculated. She exhales, slow and deep, her posture remaining poised. The pilot shakes his head with an air of superiority. "Look, lady, let's not make a scene. If you don't belong here, it's better to leave now before things get messy." The flight attendant giggles, nodding in agreement. "Yeah, wouldn't want to cause trouble, would we?" Silence stretches in the cabin. The billionaire says nothing. She doesn't react, doesn't flinch. Instead, she reaches into her bag, retrieves her phone, and dials a number. The billionaire lifts her phone to her ear, her expression still composed, but something in her demeanor has shifted. The passengers around her sense it. The once dismissive flight attendant and the smug pilot don't yet realize that the casual cruelty is about to be repaid in full. The call connects almost immediately. The voice on the other end is clear, professional, and urgent. The billionaire speaks in a tone that remains steady, almost eerily calm. "Get me the regional director. Now." The flight attendant's smirk falters slightly, but she rolls her eyes, turning to the pilot. "Oh wow, she's making a phone call," she says mockingly. "What's she gonna do? Cry to customer service?" The pilot chuckles, shaking his head. "Happens all the time. These people love to act important." The billionaire ignores them, waiting as the call is transferred. There's a pause, and then a new voice comes through the line, sharp and alert. The instant she hears who's speaking, her lips curve ever so slightly. "I'm currently on board one of my jets," she says, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with unmistakable authority. "And I have a problem." The flight attendant notices the shift in tone. She frowns, glancing at the billionaire's phone screen, trying to catch a name. The pilot, still entertained by the situation, folds his arms. "Oh, come on," he scoffs. "I don't care who you think you know. Unless you're calling the CEO of this airline, I suggest you." The billionaire raises a hand, silencing him without even looking his way. The audacity stuns him for a moment, but it's the quiet power in her gesture that unnerves him. "I need an immediate personnel change on this flight," she continues into the phone, her voice smooth and unwavering. "I want the names, their records, and I want security waiting at our next stop." The flight attendant's face drains of color. "Wait, what?" she mumbles, her confidence cracking. The billionaire finally turns her gaze toward her, her expression unreadable. "You should check your work phone," she says simply. The flight attendant swallows hard, pulling out her phone. A notification flashes across the screen, an urgent message from corporate. She taps it open, and as she reads, her breath catches in her throat. The pilot's radio crackles. "Captain," a voice says, firm and serious. "We have an issue. The owner of this airline is on board, and she's requesting to speak with you immediately." The billionaire calmly lowers her phone, watching as realization crashes down on them both. Their arrogance, their assumptions, the casual cruelty, it's all about to cost them more than they ever imagined. The flight attendant's hands tremble as she stares at the billionaire, her mind scrambling for a way out. The pilot clenches his jaw, a cold sweat forming at his temple. For the first time, they understand. The flight attendant's face turns pale as she stares at her phone screen, her eyes scanning the urgent message from corporate. Her hands tremble slightly as reality sets in. The pilot, still standing with his arms crossed, notices her reaction and frowns. "What is it?" he mutters, leaning in slightly. The flight attendant slowly looks up, her voice barely above a whisper. She owns the airline." The words hit like a thunderclap. The pilot's smug expression vanishes instantly. His eyes widen, his arms slowly uncrossing as his posture stiffens. He blinks, as if trying to process what he just heard. The billionaire remains seated, watching their reactions with an unreadable expression. The silence in the cabin is suffocating. First-class passengers who had been silently observing now exchange glances, some whispering, others simply stunned. The pilot clears his throat, attempting to regain composure. "That can't be right," he mutters. He grabs his radio, clicking it with forced confidence. "Control, confirm the identity of the passenger in seat 1A. A few seconds pass before a voice crackles through. "Captain, the passenger in 1A is Miss Sinclair, CEO and majority shareholder of this airline. You are to comply with her requests immediately." The pilot's hand tightens around the radio, his knuckles turning white. His throat bobs as he swallows hard. He slowly turns his head toward the billionaire, his arrogance completely shattered. The flight attendant stumbles backward, her breath coming in short gasps. Her mind races, trying to think of something, anything, to undo what she had just done. I'm so sorry," she stammers, forcing a nervous laugh. "I had no idea. If I had known." The billionaire raises a single hand, cutting her off. "But you did know," she says, her voice calm yet razor-sharp. You saw my first-class ticket. You had proof, and yet you still chose to treat me with disrespect. The flight attendant's mouth opens and closes, but no words come out. The pilot takes a shaky breath. Miss Sinclair, I assure you, this was just a misunderstanding. A mistake. If we could just. The billionaire picks up her phone again. She doesn't need to say much. Just a few quiet words to the person on the other end, and the decision is made. The flight attendant's phone buzzes violently in her hand. She looks down and sees another message. Her breath catches in her throat as she reads it. Effective immediately. You are terminated from your position. Return to headquarters upon landing. The pilot's radio crackles again. Captain, corporate has issued an order. You are to be relieved of duty upon landing. A replacement crew is already being arranged. The billionaire finally stands, adjusting the cuff of her designer blazer as she looks at them both. The flight attendant sways on her feet, her face drained of all color. The pilot grips the back of a seat to steady himself. The billionaire steps forward slowly, her movements graceful yet commanding. The once arrogant pilot and flight attendant stand frozen, their confidence shattered beyond repair. The entire first-class cabin watches in stunned silence, barely daring to breathe. Some passengers exchange glances, while others look away, realizing they had just witnessed something they wouldn't soon forget. The pilot, his face now slick with nervous sweat, stammers as he tries to salvage what little dignity he has left. Miss Sinclair, please, he says, his voice no longer filled with authority but rather quiet desperation. I have a family. This job, this career, it's all I have. The billionaire meets his gaze, her expression unreadable. He's searching for sympathy, for mercy, for anything that could reverse his fate. But he finds nothing in her eyes. The flight attendant steps forward next, her hands trembling, her voice cracking. I wasn't thinking, she says. I let my emotions get the best of me. It was a mistake, an awful mistake, but I swear I didn't mean. The billionaire tilts her head slightly, watching as the flight attendant stumbles over her own words. It's almost fascinating to witness the shift, how quickly arrogance turns into fear when power changes hands. The billionaire doesn't have to raise her voice or make a scene. Her mere presence, the weight of her authority, is enough. A flight supervisor, summoned by corporate, enters the first-class cabin, her heels clicking against the carpet as she approaches the billionaire with the utmost respect. Miss Sinclair, she says, her voice steady yet professional. On behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize for the conduct of our crew members. I assure you, their actions do not reflect our company's values. The billionaire nods slightly, acknowledging the apology without a word. The supervisor turns toward the pilot and flight attendant, her expression sharp and disapproving. You both will disembark at the next stop, she says firmly. Corporate has already arranged your replacements. The pilot swallows hard, gripping the back of a seat for support. The flight attendant lets out a shaky breath, her face pale and hollow. Meanwhile, other passengers begin murmuring among themselves, some whispering about how satisfying it is to see justice served in real time. A businessman in a suit leans toward his seatmate. I knew something was off when they started harassing her, he mutters. They had no idea who they were messing with. The billionaire glances down at her phone, receiving a confirmation message from corporate. The decisions have been finalized. Everything is already in motion. She slowly lifts her gaze back toward the disgraced crew members. The weight of their consequences hangs heavily in the air, suffocating them with an undeniable finality. The pilot clenches his jaw, his eyes filled with regret, while the flight attendant wipes away a tear threatening to fall.